gender-based violence area of responsibility. But for the purpose of today, we still have some, I think maybe our interpreter for French. Thank you. If I could, which is a good maybe start to the webinar, if you would like to access interpretation, please go to the bottom of your screen. You will see the interpretation icon. Click on the icon and select your preferred language. And then you'll be able to either listen to the webinar in simultaneous translation in French, English, Portuguese, or Arabic. And maybe we can, again, if someone is fluent in one of those languages and would like to write those simple instructions in the chat, that would be very much appreciated on behalf of our team. So thank you. Excellent. Thank you. As mentioned, my name is Jessica Gorham. I am also the co-chair of the Regional GBV Working Group for East and Southern Africa. I see a lot of familiar names. So as you know, every month we have an emerging practice webinar as part of a series where we highlight on best practice or else other things in terms of advocacy that we think needs to be heard and learned from across our region, but now also globally as well. For those of us who have joined us previously, we had an advocacy event for focused on North Kivu province. And an issue that was highlighted very strongly was the issue of women, and more desperately, perhaps adolescent girls who are forced into working in brothels. And I want to be clear about the language that we use when we talk about this issue, particularly when we're saying girls are working in brothels. And we must recognize that this is a form of gender-based violence and this is rape. So throughout the presentation, I want us to keep that in mind. As we see here on our opening screen, the weight of silence, the exploitation of women and girls in brothels in North Kivu province of DRC. As a result of that priority issue, the GBV AOR in the DRC has requisitioned a study to be undertaken that focused on understanding this issue more, and then also about how we can mitigate and then prevent future acts in the North Kivu province. But I'm hoping all of us on the line today can learn from some of the lessons that they are going to present. So just a couple of ground rules. Please keep your microphones on silent. Also, we request that you do not use your video cameras because we have so many people joining us from so many different areas with low bandwidth. So please keep that in mind as well. If you have any questions, please do write them in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat for questions that are written in English. And I will ask that our interpreters at the end, if you are able to note, we will ask for those languages that maybe you don't feel comfortable writing in English, you'll have an opportunity to ask via the interpreters some additional questions. So I think without further ado, we will get started. Again, I'm really happy to see all of you on the line so that we can learn more about this really complex issue and also hopefully learn some more about mitigation efforts as well. I'm really pleased to present my colleague, Esmeralda Alabre, who is the GBV AOR coordinator in the North Kivu region. She will start off our presentation today, and she is joined by Linda Lorien, who is working for Bandu dans la Rue, which is a local organization who works specifically with women and girls who are forced into prostitution and are exploited in brothels in North Kivu. So we'll get more of an overview of the study, but then we'll get what it looks like practically in the field as well. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Esmeralda. Thank you. Over to you, Esmeralda.
Thank you, Jessica. I hope everybody can hear me fine. So as mentioned, I'm Esmeralda, and I will be presenting actually some of the key findings about this study that has been done in the North Kivu province. And of course, it's always good also to have echo from the field. So that's why we'll be having the coordinator, Linda, who's the coordinator of Bon Dieu dans la Rue, who will highlight some of the key aspects also and project implementation as per working with the vulnerable women and girls being exploited and the brothels. Next slide, please. So just quickly, we'll see the context of the DRC, but more specifically North Kivu, the study itself, the key methodology, the findings, and also some of the recommendation. And as mentioned, also we'll have Linda from Bon Dieu dans la Rue that will also mention some of the activity that they undertake with the women and girls, most specifically the adolescent girl in North Kivu and some particular province. And then as well, we'll see what is the next step or the ongoing action that we are currently implementing in the North Kivu province. Next slide, please. So the DRC is one of the most severe, complex, and neglected humanitarian crises globally. Most population have been plunged into further insecurity in Eastern Congo, Eastern DRC, most likely the province of North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri, since there has been conflict and intercommunal clashes escalated since 2020, the end of 2022. As we are speaking, around 25.4 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance in the DRC. And by the end of May of this year, 2.79 million people were displaced in North Kivu. And most of them, more than half, which is more than 500,000, are living around Goma, as well in the territories of Rutshuru, Lubero, and also Minova and the South Kivu. One of the things that we need to understand is that pocket of makeshift tent has pop up along roads and isolated area where this access of basic needs is quite in existence. The other things also is like for women and girls, GBV, particularly physical and sexual violence, it's a daily threat in the eastern part of the Congo. These attacks constitute a targeted attack of the rights, physical safety, identity, and dignity, as their body actually are seen as an extension of the battlefield. In the first semester of this year, we have over 27,000 GBV
Esmeralda?
cases that were reported. Yes?
Can I ask you to please slow down on behalf of the interpreters? Thank you.
Yes, I will slow down.
Thank you.
Perfect. So as I was mentioning, in the first semester of this year, over 27,000 cases were reported in one or many of these service points, either medical care, psychosocial, economic recovery, or as well the legal assistance. As you can see, the picture there are actually pictures of the camp, the IDP camps around Goma. So as you can see, the situation there is quite dire. Next slide, please. The other aspect also, as I mentioned, in terms of the severity of the GBV in the DRC, we've seen actually most of the women and girls that's being, in humanitarian context, the main driver for women and girls to be engaged in transactional sex was food insecurity and extreme poverty. So the people affected by the conflict and crisis has disruption in social and economic life, including family separation, loss of income, but also we've seen the breakdown of the traditional social structure, but also livelihood mechanism. We've seen also the access to basic needs and livelihood is interrupted for a long period. So all these factors increase the pressure on the women and girls to find other ways and means to actually find other way to support themselves, but also to support their dependents. Next slide, please. Okay. So as I mentioned already, the situation in terms of severity, as you can see, most part of the DRC, actually the GBV situation is quite dire, and we have most of the territories and provinces between catastrophic or moderate. So as you can see, the eastern part of the Congo is where actually we have most of this issue. Next slide. So as part for the brothels itself, it's not a new phenomenon in the North Kivu, given the humanitarian context. Already in 2017, there has been some alert about this issue, but as we've seen, it's following the intensification of clashes related to the M23 crisis, but to the ADF crisis also, and the upper north of the North Kivu, there has been a proliferation of brothels. But also the other aspect is the number of people, including minors, who actually are being exploiting or recourse to this survival mechanism has increased. So as we've seen all these alerts as the GBV, it was also key for us to have a better understanding of what this is entail, why we have so many women, but also we have adolescent girls being exploited, and why people still recourse to this mechanism despite all the consequences and the effects that it can have on them. So basically, the GBV has also the support of the political and administrative authorities, but also one thing that was very important was the support of the HCT, so the Humanitarian Country Team, as well as the Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator Office, which has helped in having so many key and large-scale initiatives. So before this study, we also had a workshop to introduce the issue to most humanitarian actors, because one of the things we realized, and as Jessica mentioned at the beginning, there was this misconception about the women or the girl who recourse to this type of survival mechanism. So there was two workshops that's been done, many presentation also to different authority as well to the donors, so that everybody could have the same understanding when we talked about the brothels, when we talk about the exploitation of women and girls in these brothels. So the study itself started last year, at the end of last year. So to ensure an ethical approach, it was also very important for us that the study be carried out by two independent consultants. So there has been a full process where actually before we engage those consultants, where there has been, we publish the request to have those consultants, and there was a full examination of their profile to be able actually to have people that can carry out this study. So we end up having a professor working at the University of Goma, which has the lead with another consultant. So just to give actually the ethical approach, but also to ensure that the finding will be presented in a way that is can be understanding by everybody. So the aim of the study, as shown in this slide, was basically to assess the extent of the GBV, the gender-based violence, including the sexual and exploitation and abuse of the women and girls, to have a better understanding of the issue, but as well to prepare an appropriate response. So the specific objective were actually to understand the social demographic characteristic of the interviewee. It was also important to understand the type of abuse that these women and these girls actually are facing and the daily basis. And the other aspect also is to be able to find solution, we need to understand the scope of the problem. So when we're talking about brothels, how many brothels? So that way also it could help in the advocacy to be done to the government. So that way we can ensure we have a concrete solution, concrete way actually to work with the women and girls being exploited. Next slide, please. So the the scope for the study itself actually covered the whole province of North Kivu. So in North Kivu, we have 3 cities and 6 territories. So basically all 3 cities, all 6 territories were actually covered by this study. The other aspect also, it was important to understand how to ensure we have the buy-in of the community. So for that reason, there has been some local enquêteurs, if I could say, that were actually being hired with the consultant to engage. But also the other aspect, it was important to have local authority, traditional leaders, as well as local actors to be involved in the study, so we can really be having that proximity to the community, because some of the places where this study occur are very remote area where even access is quite difficult. So the methodology that were used by the consultant, and it is to mention also, throughout the process, as the GBV AOL, we always provide the technical support also to the consultant, but also to the gender division, in order to respect also all the guiding principles, to ensure that also the services were known by the community if during those different focus groups, someone's actually report that they are a victim. So these were actually some of the key aspects also that were quite important throughout the study, to have the services available. And if there was there was no service available in this area, to make sure at least to have some referral pathways being in place to ensure they can have the necessary information about the service, the appropriate service. So to carry out the study, as I mentioned, we had the 2 consultants. We had the Gender, Family, and Children Division that was involved as well. The Office of the Governor, just to mention, the North Kivu, it's a military, military governors. So sorry. So they were also involved, as well technical and financial partners. The other component also, we had over 30 stakeholders, INGO, NGO, local NGO, that also contribute to the study. So basically, the 2 key tools that were used were first focus group. The reason why we, while discussing with the consultant, it was important, it was the easiest way to access the community, but also to make sure that illiterate people could still have access to exchange with us, to provide us this information. And that's why it was very important to have local people being involved, that know the language, that know also the barrier that people could be facing during the interview. So it was the interview also were conducting in the form of structured or semi-structured individual interviews. So there has been a questionnaire that was tailored to really tailor the questionnaire to each category of respondent. So in total, there were 10 semi-structured individual interview and 128 structured individual interview. On top of that, we also had 26 focus group in each area of the study. So meaning in each of the 3 cities, but also in different territories, to ensure we have a large scope of information being available to actually have a complete and a thorough study. The other aspect also, next slide, please. The other aspect that was very important, it was the criteria. So who will we be discussing with? Who are the people that will be targeted by this study? So one of the things that was very important is that to have the main target to be either women and girls being engaged or being sexually exploited in the brothels, but also the people who own or run this brothel, because it was also important to understand what people are facing when you have the owners of these brothels being known by the population. So the survey participants were divided in three categories. So there were the local authority, including head of locality, the head of community, but also the head of neighborhood. So that way we have a large scope of people being involved. We also had civil society actors who has been working also in this issue. We had the leaders of women association, because as we know, most of the time women-led organizations are at the forefront of the intervention. So we had many women-led organizations also being engaged, being interviewed in this study. And also, of course, we had, as I mentioned, the largest category of people being interviewed were the women and girls being exploited or as high risk to be exploited in these brothels. So one of the things was how can we make sure to reach out to these women and girls, because it's not every person that will come to you and say, yes, I actually do I'm actually exploited and brought up. So that's why also the work that was necessary with the community. And the other aspect also, it was the consent. So we wanted to make sure that everyone who were involved in the study give the consent in order for us to use this information to be able to provide the results which were really expected by all stakeholders in the DRC, but also as well as at the more global level. So one of the things also, the study is available, and we can share the key finding, but also the full report with you. But the key result, this is where I'm gonna be concentrated the presentation, between being mindful of time. Next slide. One of the key aspects, as I mentioned, was the mapping. So to know when we're talking about brothels, how many are we talking about? And the reason why was, in the past, we went through the government to the local authority to ask them to closure of these brothels. And one of the main things they always ask is, like, you said there are brothels, but there's no proof. Where are these brothels? So by doing this mapping, it was also very important for us to showcase the scope of the issue. So basically, one of the things we've seen is like 1,063 brothels were identified. And that do not represent the full scope of the issue, as most of there are many other brothels that were not identified by the community because of fear of reprisal and so on. So that was one of the first things that we've seen. The other aspect also is to see that most of the brothels were located actually in town or in territories with high concentration of IDPs. So one of the aspects, it's also, okay, so we've seen Goma, Ruchuru, Masisi, which are the places where there are the most IDPs. That's where actually you find many brothels. So during the discussion also, one of the things that was mentioned is now brothel has become also an economic drivers for many people who do not have any other mean of surviving. So we're not talking about the women being exploited there. We are talking about the owners of the brothels who sees it actually as an economic activity like any others, while we don't take into account necessarily the exploitation of the women and girls being also exploited in these brothels. Next slide. So the other aspect also that are very important is what was the main driven factors that the women and the girls being exploited mentioned during the interview, the focus group. So it's not very surprising, but they mentioned poverty and their vulnerability as actually the main driving factors that push them to recourse to exchanging to basically being in the brothel and being exploited in the brothel. So one of the things they have mentioned is what, when they don't have enough assistance, humanitarian assistance, whether food, whether NFI, so they still have to find a way to survive. So that's where actually they will be approached by people in the IDP side, mentioning that they have other they have work for them. So basically giving the high level of vulnerability, we have these women and these girls and sometimes parents sending their adolescent girl, but sometimes also minor that's 8-9 years old, to these brothels. In French, the name is sounds very terrible. It's called Maison de Tolérance. And one of the things we always mention is like, who are we tolerating in these brothels? Because when you say maison de tolérance, we're tolerating actually the rape and the sexual exploitation of women and girls. The other aspect also, it was important to understand where, when we talked about maison de tolérance, don't have in mind those hotel, those fancy places where we see sometimes. No, most of the places where the abuse occur, where sometimes the home, alter the hotel, and we also have many people mentioning the unoccupied tents and the IDP side. So this was also a very surprising finding of the study, that when you have tents that were not occupied in the IDP side, so they have become actually brothels where women and girls are being exploited. So the other aspect also, it was to understand the level of education of the women and girls being exploited in these brothels. One of the key findings, it was 55.5% of these women has no level of education whatsoever. So which also hinders the opportunity to have other means to take care of themselves. We have seen also 23.4% had primary education, so the basic of the basic, and 20.8% as secondary education. The other aspect also that we find out is there were also what we call intermediaries, especially when it has to do with the minor, with the adolescent girls or younger victim, where actually 70% of the money paid by the perpetrator is taken by this middleman, if you could say. So more than 70% of this money will not even go to the exploited girls, to exploited women. The other aspect we have found out also throughout the interview is that many of the minors actually were commissioned by the manager of pubs, brothel, and so on. And the other component is some parents or even guardian also sometimes send the minor, particularly the teenage girl, to the brothels for them to become victim of rape, in order to make a profit that will be used not only for personal needs but also for the whole family needs. Next slide. And the other aspect we've mentioned was the profile of the alleged perpetrator. It was very important for us to understand also who are these people actually who goes in these brothels. So one of the key aspects we've seen, it was the internally displacement themselves. We have the host population, unidentified men, taxi drivers, site manager, but as well the humanitarian. So this is actually some of the findings, some of the people, alleged perpetrator that was mentioned by the women and by the girls. We wanted also to understand what are the consequences, the effect that the women are facing while being exploited. And unfortunately, we've seen the level of unwanted pregnancy was quite high for this specific target population. There was also the contraction of STDs, but also we've seen there was complication from unsafe abortion. As a reminder, if you could see the previous picture on the first slide, the health system there, it's collapsing again. because of the humanitarian crisis. So when you have so many needs, health needs also, it's gonna show the weight on the humanitarian assistance. The other aspect also was in terms of protection. What we've seen is these women being exploited also at a higher risk for other form of GBV, right? The emotional, physical violence, but as well the denial of resources or an opportunity. And in terms of consequences in the community, there was a lot of social isolation and suicidal thoughts. So that's why many of the women and girls being exploited did not want to report that they were being exploited, because actually they fear the reprisal, they fear the community stigma, and also because they do not have any other means to take care of themselves or of their family. Next slide, please. So basically, following this, we wanted to make some key recommendation. So we sum up those recommendations with those two key points. The first was to reinforce the leadership and accountability of the authority, humanitarian development actors. So on the next slide, we'll go a bit more in detail. But one of the things that we've seen is that often when we talked about this exploitation and abuse in brothels, many times the feedback that we have is like, yeah, but this is normal. It's the way things are. People don't have any other ways and mean to take care of themselves. So what can we do? So most of the time, this is the reaction we used to have, either from the authorities, the humanitarian, but also the development actors. It's like, this problem is too much for us to tackle. So that's why one of the key things for us was to make sure people understand what is it we're talking about when we mention I think there's an issue with the slide. So it was very important actually for, if we could go back, please. It was very important actually to
Hi,
that
Esmeralda.
extent.
If you give
Yes.
us 1 minute, we're gonna post the presentation with your additional slide. Excuse us, just give us 1 minute.
But I can still go, so for a matter of time.
Sorry, everyone. She had an additional slide with some more in-depth recommendations. It'll just take 1 minute for us to re-share that, a newer presentation. I apologize. It's my fault. But there were some very good recommendations that were specific to different entities in the DRC and for all of us, which I think we can use as a takeaway. Over to you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Jessica. So, and in terms of the recommendation, because we saw also the two main recommendations were too broad. So that's why we went to really ensure that everyone, each and every stakeholder understand what they can do and what is necessary to really tackle this issue that has a lot of impact in terms of protection, in terms of health, and that has a cost also for the community as a whole. So some of the key recommendation were, Jessica, it's still the first slide. I don't know if you can show the slide 10. So the first one recommendation were actually for the provincial government. So one of the aspects were actually to reinforce the legal measure for victims to have access to justice and to fight impunity. And the reason why this one was quite important, it was one of the key finding also is the reason people will not report is because they tell you at the end of the day, I will report, and the next day I will see my rapist just being in town. No, nothing has happened to them. So this actually the fighting impunity was actually a key recommendation, something that's needed to be done, and to really strengthen the legal mechanism that can actually support the women and girls that will actually report this exploitation. The other aspect also were to strengthen the protection mechanism for the victim, but also the organization that actually report this abuse. Because unfortunately, in the past, we had cases where the organization working on this issue were targeted not only by the brothels owners, but also by other authorities that were actually involved in this issue. So this is also why we wanted to make sure to highlight the aspect of strengthening this protection mechanism for the victim. Do we have safe shelter if we have to relocate victims, especially the one actually that were in the IDP side? The other aspect also is the gender division. We have a gender division who has all the will to do the work, but unfortunately, there's a need for further leadership, because there's a provincial prevention and protection plan that we have elaborated, where we need the leadership of the gender division to ensure that all actors, all stakeholders working on this topic feel actually they have to be involved. The other aspect also were to increase the awareness, because one of the things that was mentioned by the interviewee is that many of them don't know their right. Many of them don't know actually there are laws to protect them from GBV, but also from SCA. So it was very important in local languages how we can disseminate the information about the protection mechanism, but also the law, the Congolese law that protect women and girls from being exploited in these brothels. The other aspect also were to work closely with the financial and technical partner. So it was important to use that opportunity to highlight once more the need to advocate with the government for this financial and technical partner to use the different fora to make sure that the fight against impunity, access to justice, but also to have the effectiveness of the reparation mechanism for victims. Because the DRC actually has a specific entity responsible for reparation for any type of crime happening in humanitarian setting. So it's called FUNAREF. So how we can ensure this reparation mechanism is actually effective and take into account the women and girls being exploited, being raped as a result of the humanitarian crisis and the conflict happening in the province. So, and the other aspect also where how we can strengthen funding for economic resilience, because one thing that we've seen is vulnerability and poverty as the driving factors, for women and girls to be exploited. So it was very important also for the government, but for the financial and technical partner to strengthen the funding mechanism for economic resilience. Just to mention, for every 100 women who receive medical care, GBV survivor who receive medical care, only 25 actually receive some type of support in terms of economic resilience or economic recovery. So it's just to show you actually the scope of the issue. So that also the other aspect is how we can ensure we have more mechanism, more work being done for prevention. Because unfortunately, as of now, prevention is not really something being taken into consideration most of the time in North Kivu in terms of GBV. The other aspect was also for humanitarian actors, how they can make sure to systematically integrate and finance GBV and SCA risk mitigation and humanitarian response. So this was actually one of the key aspects we ask. It's also to make sure that this component is not only a matter of GBV actors, of protection actors or child protection actors, but all sectors, all humanitarian sectors, food security, NFI, health, WASH, and so on, see how they can integrate it, and also in the vulnerability criteria that they will be using, how they can ensure to integrate that aspect also in it. So I will stop there because I am mindful of time, and I would like to introduce Linda, who will actually in a few minutes also give us some insights about her work as a local organization working in the DRC and North Kivu. The name of the organization is Bon Dieu dans la rue. Linda?
Bonjour à tous, bonjour Madame Esmeralda. Moi c'est Linda Amani, je suis la directrice de l'ONG Bon Dieu dans la rue. Bon Dieu dans la rue remercie d'abord Madame Esmeralda, la coordinatrice, pour la parole qui nous est accordée pour que nous puissions partager notre expérience. Je ne sais pas si tout le monde est en train de me suivre pour que je puisse continuer.
Oui, on vous entend bien. Nous vous entendons.
On vous entend bien.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Au fait, nous, Bon Dieu dans la rue, nous sommes une organisation non gouvernementale des droits congolais. Nous avons été créés depuis 2008. Et notre mission, c'est de soutenir la nouvelle génération, les jeunes et les enfants. Et notre siège se trouve à Goma. Nous sommes dans 3 provinces, entre autres la province du North Kivu, Sud Kivu et le Tanganyika. Et pour ce qui concerne la thématique de prise en charge des cas de femmes qui sont victimes d'exploitation dans les maisons de tolérance, Bon Dieu dans la rue a été initié dans ces activités à cause de nos activités de routine de prise en charge des enfants marginalisés, les enfants vivant dans la rue. Et nous étions obligés de suivre les cas, donc dans la gestion des cas, et ce sont les enfants de la rue qui nous ont orientés vers cette thématique et que nous-mêmes, on ne savait pas, parce que les enfants vivant dans la rue, les filles adolescentes, étaient souvent victimes des EAS dans les maisons de tolérance. C'est ainsi que nous avons vraiment compris toutes les atrocités qui sont commises dans les maisons de tolérance, et la direction avait décidé que l'on puisse aussi s'intéresser à cette thématique. Cette thématique était, au début, on a semblé que ça va être facile, mais ça n'a pas été facile jusqu'à ce jour. C'est vraiment très compliqué, il y a trop de défis et c'est très compliqué d'obtenir de bons résultats. En fait, nous avons eu à avoir pas mal de projets dans le cadre de nos interventions, dans le cadre de nos domaines d'intervention, mais je vais juste parler de 4 grands domaines d'intervention de Bon Dieu dans la rue. Le premier domaine, c'est la protection de l'enfance et la protection et autonomisation de la femme. En fait, Bon Dieu dans la rue, c'est une ONG de protection. Tout ce que nous faisons la connexion avec la protection. Même pour nos projets WASH, qui est notre deuxième domaine, on fait aussi une connexion avec la protection, tous les problèmes de protection liés aux services et infrastructures WASH, nous intervenons dedans. Et aussi l'éducation qui est liée aussi à la protection, mais aussi la sécurité alimentaire. Ce sont les 4 grands domaines dans lesquels nous sommes en train de travailler actuellement, et nous avons y obtenu pas mal de projets. Et nos partenaires actuellement, c'est International Rescue Committee, et aussi nous avons le financement de Boer Charity. On a reçu le financement de Stat Fund à travers Dutch Weltunga Hilf, mais aussi le financement de BMZ. Et par rapport à nos interventions dans les maisons de tolérance, quand on a été associé à ces activités, on a eu à faire d'abord la cartographie des maisons de tolérance. C'était juste une liste qu'on pouvait chaque fois actualiser pour comprendre quelles sont les maisons de tolérance qui sont dans la ville de Goma, zone de santé de Goma, Karisimbi et même Nyiragongo qui est autour, et le territoire de Masisi qui est tout près de la ville de Goma. Là, je parle de Sake et Kiroche. Nous avons tenu une liste de maisons de tolérance que chaque mois, nous étions en train de mettre à jour parce que, vous savez, dans l'histoire des maisons de tolérance, il y a toujours des changements parce que les maisons de tolérance sont traquées par les gouvernements, notamment par l'ANER, l'Agence nationale de renseignement et la police. Maintenant, quand une maison de tolérance est en train d'être traquée, il change d'adresse, il change d'endroit. Et si vous avez une liste, vous êtes obligé de la mettre à jour au moins chaque mois parce que la maison change, soit de nom ou bien d'adresse. La deuxième activité, donc, c'est lié à la première. On fait le monitoring de protection dans les maisons de tolérance pour savoir qui sont dans les maisons de tolérance, quelles sont les filles, les femmes qui sont là-bas, comment elles sont traitées. Mais aussi, j'aimerais vraiment signaler que nous faisons ces activités dans les maisons de tolérance sous couvert des activités de santé. Nous sommes connus comme état des agents de santé qui sensibilisent les femmes dans le cadre du planning familial, la santé de la reproduction, la santé sexuelle. On donne des conseils, des orientations aux filles pour ne pas tomber enceinte, pour ne pas avoir des maladies sexuellement transmissibles. Et des fois, on peut faire la distribution des condoms quand nous en avons en stock. Et nous sommes connus vraiment dans beaucoup de maisons de tolérance parce qu'on sait que nos agents sont des agents de santé qui viennent pour sensibiliser. Et c'est à ce moment-là que les agents profitent maintenant pour gérer les cas individuels que les agents retrouvent dans les maisons de tolérance. Aussi, nous faisons la prévention psychosociale, comme je l'ai dit, et la réinsertion scolaire des enfants ici, des viols et des EAS, parce que grâce à la gratuité, on a eu cette stratégie de commencer à orienter les femmes et les filles qui sont victimes des EAS dans les mesures de tolérance, comment elles peuvent scolariser leurs enfants parce qu'elles peuvent s'appuyer sur ces enfants à l'avenir. Et aussi, la dernière activité que nous faisons, c'est la réinsertion socio-économique des filles et des femmes qui sont venues des maisons de tolérance, aux côtés des femmes survivantes de violences basées sur les genres et aux côtés aussi des femmes vulnérables de la communauté pour éviter la stigmatisation. Et là, sur l'image, vous pouvez voir, on avait un projet pour la formation des femmes et filles sur la confection des serviettes hygiéniques lavables. On a fait appel à tous les bénéficiaires qui sont concernés, qui sont intéressés. Il y avait la cible des femmes et filles qui sont venues des maisons de tolérance. Il y avait la cible des femmes et filles victimes survivantes de viols. Et aussi, il y avait aussi d'autres femmes de la communauté qui étaient vulnérables, qui étaient exposées à des problèmes d'exploitation dans les maisons de tolérance. Donc, on les a mis ensemble pour les former dans les sites de déplacés de Lushagala. Donc, et aussi, par rapport au nombre de bénéficiaires actuellement dans le cadre de la réinsertion socio-économique et aussi la gestion des cas, nous avons atteint aujourd'hui 1067 bénéficiaires, dont 578 filles, 52 garçons. Je voudrais vraiment mentionner, dans le cadre des activités dans les maisons de tolérance, il y a aussi des garçons que vous allez trouver qui sont aussi exploités sexuellement, mais aussi vous avez trouvé d'autres garçons qui sont comme des commissionnaires. Donc, les garçons sont aussi dans les maisons pour être utilisés à aller recruter les filles qui pourront venir intégrer les maisons de tolérance. Et quand nous entrons comme ça, il y a des garçons, il y a des garçons qui disent qu'en tout cas, moi, ça ne me plaît pas de rester ici. Je suis obligée de travailler pour cette maison de tolérance parce que j'ai une dette digérale, tout ça. Et dans la prise en charge, ces genres de cas sont aussi pris en charge par Bon Dieu dans la rue. Il y a aussi 469 femmes qui ont aussi bénéficié de nos activités dans le cadre de nos interventions dans les maisons de tolérance. Est-ce qu'on peut évoluer avec la présentation? Oui, par rapport aux défis et opportunités, comme je l'ai mentionné, au début, on avait pensé que ça va être très facile, on va se rapprocher des autorités, les maisons de tolérance vont être fermées et les proxénètes vont être punis, mais ça n'a pas été le cas. On s'est retrouvé dans des difficultés parce que souvent, on a remarqué que les maisons de tolérance sont tenues par les gens qui sont soit proches des autorités politico-administratives militaires, sont soit les mêmes autorités qui sont des tenaciers, qui gagnent de l'argent derrière les femmes. Et on a eu vraiment des incidents. Il y a même, à un moment donné, on avait arrêté nos moniteurs, mais c'est après que les moniteurs avaient été libérés parce que on a dit, nous sommes des agents de santé, comment vous allez vous attaquer à nous, c'est nous qui aidons. Et depuis ces jours-là, il n'y a pas eu d'incident parce qu'on nous identifie à des agents de santé. Et aussi, nous avons un défi parce que nous ne disposons pas d'un centre de formation et d'apprentissage des métiers. Pour gérer un cas d'une fille ou bien une femme qui est sortie des maisons de tolérance, il faut vraiment de la patience. Souvent, on est obligé de les référer dans d'autres maisons de formation et d'autres maisons de formation ne disposent pas de cette capacité, de cette patience que nous avons pour pouvoir l'aider à finir sa formation. Et vous trouvez que des fois, au milieu même de la formation, la fille ou bien la femme peut abandonner parce que la maison qui l'a accueillie n'a pas été patiente. Parce qu'il faut vraiment de la patience, il faut vraiment de la technicité pour pouvoir l'accompagner et qu'elle arrive jusqu'à la fin de la formation. Il y a aussi la majorité des femmes et des filles exploitées pensent que les viols, c'est la seule forme. Donc, quand on se rapproche des filles, donc quand on se rapproche des filles, elles ont tendance de dire que non, moi, je n'ai pas de problème, mais c'est après qu'elles comprennent que, en tout cas, moi, je suis exploitée, donc je dois voir comment me prendre en charge moi-même. Et aussi, pendant cette période où le contexte actuel du Nord Kivu est vraiment compliqué, il n'y a pas assez d'assistance, il y a des milliers de déplacés dans la ville de Goma et autour de Goma. Maintenant, les tenaciers, ils ont développé une stratégie de recrutement dans les sites de déplacés parce que c'est là qu'il y a les filles et les femmes qui sont dans les besoins. Et vraiment, les tenaciers sont partout. Dans chaque site, il y a toujours des recrutements qui se font et on ne sait pas comment arrêter tout ça. Il y a aussi les projets qui prennent en charge vraiment les femmes qui sortent des maisons de tolérance sont sous-financés. Il n'y en a pas assez. Seulement, il y a vraiment beaucoup trop de financement dans le cadre de la prise en charge des femmes survivantes de violences sexuelles et sexistes. Mais pour les femmes qui viennent vraiment des maisons de tolérance, il n'y a pas assez de financement. C'est un défi pour nous. On ne sait pas comment prendre en charge tous les cas qui sont gérés à travers Bondier Dalari. Et aussi la dénonciation des cas, en tout cas, la majorité des femmes et filles qui sont exploitées, elles ont peur de dénoncer parce qu'elles savent qu'il y aura des représailles. Et d'autres sont là parce qu'elles ont des dettes et des dettes. Parce qu'elle n'a pas où aller, elle est partie habiter là-bas. Quand elle veut sortir, on va lui demander, lui donner la facture, il faut payer ça, il faut payer les loyers. Pendant toute cette période, tu étais là avec tes enfants, Donc, il faut payer les loyers. Maintenant, elle est obligée de rester. Elle a peur de quitter. Je me rappelle, à un moment donné, il y a une fille qui avait quitté. Par force, elle est partie. Maintenant, les tenanciers sont venus à notre bureau pour nous exiger de payer. Et ils ont amené une facture que nous devons payer. Ils ont dit qu'elle est partie avec des ustensiles de cuisine, tout ça. Et après, on a discuté avec la divorce qui nous accompagne, et déjà famille enfant. On a trouvé un consensus et le tenancier n'a pas su nous demander de payer toutes ces choses-là qu'il demandait. Et la fille a évolué actuellement, elle est vraiment libre. Elle a pu trouver quelque chose, une activité pour continuer à se prendre en charge. Et aussi, par rapport à la corruption, ça ne nous facilite pas. Parce que quand il y a les cas qui décident d'aller à la justice, au niveau de la justice, il n'y a pas accompagnement, il y a la corruption. Et au finish, elle est obligée soit de quitter la ville parce qu'elle est poursuivie par ses bourreaux, tout ça. Et elle nous dit que c'est vous, bon Dieu, dans la rue, qui m'aviez mis dans cette erreur. Je ne pouvais pas aller à la justice avec telle personne parce que c'est une personne très forte, tout ça. Donc ça, c'est vraiment, ce sont des défis auxquels nous faisons face au quotidien. Maintenant, les opportunités que nous avons, c'est parce que pour le moment d'abord, les sous-clusters VBG est intéressé par cette thématique. Maintenant, nous avons quand même une nouvelle coordinatrice qui est en train de nous accompagner dans nos activités, qui peut nous écouter dans tous les problèmes que nous avons. Et aussi, l'enquête qui a été menée, c'est une base vraiment qui nous aide aussi dans la planification de nos interventions. L'enquête nous aide aussi dans l'orientation de tout ce que nous faisons comme action, de plaidoyer, tout ça. Et aussi, à un moment donné, il y a une autre circulaire du maire de la ville qui visait la fermeture. Quand même, il y a je m'excuse, il y a quelques maisons de tolérance qui ont été fermées, des grandes maisons de tolérance. Et ça, c'est vraiment une réussite que nous sommes en train de louer chaque jour. Et aussi, l'opportunité aussi que nous avons, c'est que bon Dieu dans l'arrière, en tout cas, maîtrise l'environnement qui règne dans les maisons de tolérance. Nous maîtrisons vraiment, nous avons la technique pour communiquer avec les filles et les femmes qui sont victimes d'exploitation, et avec les tenanciers, on peut communiquer avec eux facilement, et ils peuvent nous écouter à travers les stratégies que nous avions eu à mettre en place. Voilà en ce qui concerne les opportunités. Maintenant, pour finir avec les partages d'expériences que je fais avec vous, je voudrais partager avec vous les témoignages d'une fille qui a été exploitée dans une maison de tolérance, et je vais les lire tel que c'est écrit pour que vous puissiez comprendre sa situation. Donc, mon nom, c'est Meta. C'est un nom qui a été pris pour la circonstance seulement. Je suis une fille âgée de 17 ans. J'ai un enfant d'une année et dont je ne connais pas le père. Lorsque mes deux parents s'étaient séparés, chaque enfant a pris sa direction. Alors que je n'avais nulle part où aller et aucune occupation à mon âge de 15 ans, je voyais mes amis filles qui se prenaient en charge, qui s'achetaient des habits, des bijoux et des chaussures, car elles se débrouillaient, soi-disant elles travaillaient. Un jour, elles m'ont proposé de m'amener chez une maman généreuse que tout le monde appelle maman, pour qu'elle puisse me venir aussi en aide. Et c'est elle qui m'avait appris à offrir des services sexuels aux hommes qui venaient fumer et boire de l'alcool dans sa maison. L'argent était perçu par maman, et à la fin de la journée, elle me donnait une somme équivalente à 3 000 francs congolais et 5 000 francs congolais selon sa volonté, même si j'ai reçu plus de 5 hommes par jour. Lorsque je suis tombée enceinte, Elle m'a chassée de chez elle parce que j'avais refusé qu'elle me fasse avorter de manière traditionnelle. Par manque où aller, je suis allée construire un abri dans un site de déplacés en territoire de Nyiragongo. Et c'est là que j'ai mis au monde mon enfant. Pour survivre, j'ai continué à me rendre dans les chambres, donc dans les maisons de tolérance, pour offrir le sexe en fait de trouver de quoi nourrir mon enfant et moi, quand il n'y a pas de l'aide humanitaire. Les clients payaient les gérants qui me connectaient et ces derniers me donnaient de quoi nourrir mon enfant. Depuis le jour où j'ai rencontré Bondier dans la rue, il m'a aidé avec des conseils et m'a présenté à la DIVAS qui est actuellement à la recherche de ma famille. J'ai appris avec Bondier dans la rue, j'ai appris comment sensibiliser les autres femmes sur les questions VBG et la gestion des menstrues pour une bonne hygiène et assainissement en tant que père éducatrice de Bondier dans la rue dans le site de Lushagala. Nous avons aussi été formés sur la fabrication de serviettes hygiéniques lavables. Comme je n'avais pas une machine à coudre, avec l'épée que j'ai gagnée, j'ai appris à faire des beignets que je vends aujourd'hui pour nourrir mon enfant. Voilà en bref l'histoire et l'image qui est là. C'est lors de sa rencontre avec l'assistance sociale de la DIVAS et accompagnée de notre chargé de IDTR, de Bondier Dalari. Voilà, donc c'est ça en bref la situation des filles et femmes exploitées. Et je voudrais profiter de cette occasion pour demander en tout cas qu'il y ait beaucoup plus de financement, que les ONG qui interviennent dans les maisons de tolérance puissent être appuyées parce que c'est l'exploitation dans les maisons de tolérance actuellement un ampleur vraiment qui n'est pas vraiment à déconsidérer, qui n'est pas à négliger pour le moment parce que après demain, on va vraiment récolter des mauvaises choses suite à cette situation. Donc, je vous remercie et je remets la parole à Madame Esmeralda.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for actually giving those insights from local NGO. Just as I mentioned, I'm mindful of time. So these actually are the partners that were involved in this study who support a way or another. And as you can see, most of them are actually local organizations which are members of the GBVAOA, and many of them also were women-led organization. So this is one of the things, and as part of the ongoing action that's the GBVAOA with all the partners putting in place, we have a workshop next week actually to review and update the prevention and protection action plan to ensure also that we integrate all the components from other sectors and from other sectors, but also from other divisions, because it was important to have something that's to have a work plan that is being done by all stakeholders, by all partners. The other aspect also, it's in the North Kivu, we have a GBV prevention task force that we are putting in place, which also help in the analysis of the prevention initiative that's being in place and what can be done, especially in terms of social behavioral communication change, positive masculinity, because as you've seen, as mentioned also by our colleagues, one of the aspects also is linked directly to the lack or to insufficient funding for prevention. The other aspect is the high-level advocacy, either at the provincial, national, and global level. And once again, I want to thank Jessica and all the regional team for providing this platform for us to share what has been done at our level, but also how we can work with other how we can work also with other partners and making this issue known, and what we can do also to prevent and to protect the women and girls, to prevent this issue and to protect the women from being exploited. And the other, lastly, is the resource mobilization. The good thing is that we already have some funders that's all very interesting and the topic, so they have been able to fund with the advocacy of the GBV-AWOL. We have some GBV-AWOL members who has received funding and who are currently implementing some project. One of the project mentioned by Bon Dieu dans la Rue was actually a result of all the advocacy or the work we are doing also with financial technical partners, including, I would like to recognize also ECHO, BHA, Sweden, and we hope more actually will be able to provide this continuous support to tackle this issue. So that's what we had for you. I hope it was interesting, and I think Jessica will provide all the documents, but also the contacts if there's if you guys would like to further the discussion about this opportunity we had in the DRC. Over to you, Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you, Esmeralda and Linda, for those really enlightening presentations, and also for sharing with us some of the challenges in working in your environment. I just want to reiterate, and I think you did both of you did a really good job of this, but when we talk about adolescents and girls working in brothels, we really need to, and also women, we need to really use the language of rape, because as we know, children do not work in brothels. And so we have to be really particular about sometimes the language we're using. That said, I'm wondering, Esmeralda, I have two questions before we end the session. I know we have gone a bit over time, but I see that all of our participants, and actually more, have joined. So I'm going to take a little bit of your kindness here. One is about the government's involvement. We had a few questions asking what are they doing to tackle this problem. And my second question is also related to child protection. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing, or what the role of child protection is on this issue as well? Over to you, Esmeralda.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and all the colleagues participants for the question. So one of the key aspects was important from the beginning to work with the government, because as humanitarian actors, we do not have the authority or the capacity to close those brothels. So basically, we work closely with the military governments. So even one of the circular that Madame Linda from Bon Dieu dans la Rue mentioned was from the mayor of Goma. So basically, we're really working with them in terms of those legal action that can be undertaken about to close those brothels, but also to bring the alleged perpetrators in front of justice. So, but one of the things is the situation of Goma or North Kivu is quite complex, because as you know, we have ongoing clashes, we have intercommunal conflicts still happening. So this is one of the many priority of the government. So that's why the advocacy is still needed, especially at the higher level, the national level, including how they can fund the gender division to make sure that they actually undertake the action that is expected from them. But for now, so there has been a task force, if I could say that way, that has been put in place by the mayor of Goma and the provincial governors in order to close those brothels. So far, there were 8 being closed. But if you hear 1,063 and you say 8 are being closed, that's also something that's need more improvement. But the other issue also, as we mentioned, is that some of those brothels are in IDP sites. So that's why also we are working with other actors, especially the security force, camp management, to see how we can also ensure the mitigation measures are being put in place, as example, to not have tent being used as brothels. The question about the child protection, actually, we work very closely with child protection in North Kivu, but also at the national level. So they were involved in all the component of the study, but also as part of the joint action plan. This is something also they will be working more closely with child protection, general protection, to make sure also we take into account this component for minors that are being also exploited. So there's a lot of work, and one of them, actually, we had an advocacy note that we published to reinforce the message about the issue of the brothel and the exploitation of adolescent girls. But we also work closely with the SRH working group, because as you've seen, many of these components also are linked to health issues. So to see how we can integrate sexual and reproductive health sensitization and the work with the community in this aspect as well. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Esmeralda. And thank you as well, Linda, for the really amazing work you're doing on behalf of women and girls living in IDP camps in the North Kivu region. Really, our hearts go out to both of you and to your teams doing this very difficult work. So thank you for taking the time to join us today to enable us to learn more about this issue. And I saw that there were also a lot of comments in the chat that you have colleagues and others in this community who are experiencing similar issues in their own contexts. And I hope that they will take some of the recommendations and actions that you have taken and maybe incorporate them into their own. I also want to give a big thank you to UNICEF, who is one of our member organizations, and their donor, the German corporation, who has enabled us to have simultaneous translation today. And we will be able to continue to provide simultaneous translation for all of our upcoming learning and advocacy events because of the German corporation and UNICEF's support. So we thank you very much to them. If you would like to see the recording of this, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is GBV AOR. Simply go to YouTube and search for GBV AOR. You will find our channel. You will find this webinar, and all of our previous webinars will be uploaded or are uploaded on our YouTube channel. So please make sure that you go back to our YouTube channel, and please send the link. Thank you, Cavalli, for that. If you have any questions or concerns about our learning, or if you have any suggestions, as I mentioned, please do contact Christine Cabelle, whom we appreciate very much. She is our admin here at the Regional GBV Working Group for East and Southern Africa. Cabelle, if you could put your name in the chat, that would be also very helpful. Once again, I really appreciate all of you joining me today, and we're still working through some of the challenges of simultaneous translation, but I think we're getting there. So we do appreciate your participation, and we look forward to seeing you next month at our September issue of the Emerging Practice webinar series that we are hosting through the Regional GBV Working Group for East and Southern Africa. As I mentioned, my name is Jessica, and I'd like to thank our team, Ruth, who was sharing her screen, Cabelle, who is here, Adish, who is also providing support in French. We appreciate you guys very much, and also all of our member organizations here at the regional level. Thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a great afternoon. Again, thanks, Esmeralda and Linda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'm calling now.
Thank you. Bye.
You have the
Thank you,
key, no?
everybody. We have a good time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Love you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Love you too.
Thank you so much.
Bye.